Used to play pretend, used to play pretend, money. We used to play pretend, wake up, you need the money. Used to play pretend, used to play pretend, money. Wake up, you need to make money. Yeah.
The 17th of May, 2015. 21 Pilots released their fourth studio album, Blurryface. The 17th of May, 2025. After 3 further studio albums, Trench, Scaled and Icy and Clancy, Blurryface celebrates its 10th anniversary. It's no secret that Blurryface is my favourite album by the Pilots. In fact, it's one of my favourite albums of all time, tying with All This Bad Blood by Bastille and Given Into the Wild by the Maccabees. So, to celebrate the 10th anniversary of one of my favourite records ever, this video will reflect on what made Blurryface truly great. As a quick disclaimer, this is my first ever video essay, so apologies if this isn't structured in the usual way a video essay would be. I tried doing research and used this video essay on Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom to structure my work. If I failed in making a proper video essay, I apologise. YouTube gods, please do not smite me. Secondly, whilst I am aware the purpose of most essays is to convince the reader of your argument through facts and statistics, this is a reflective essay, meaning it's going to contain a lot of opinion and therefore a lot of bias. I'm not aiming to convince anyone of anything, I'm just reflecting on what makes Blurryface a fundamentally great album in my eyes.
Blurryface is a character, a guy that I like to say I met in a different dimension, but really he represents everything that I as an individual I'm insecure about.
The crux of this era is the concept of Blurryface itself, a manifestation of smothering insecurity. Personas and alter egos aren't necessarily a new development within the conceptual work records attempt to cover. David Bowie had Ziggy Stardust, technically 2D from Gorillaz is a persona for David Albarn, and more recently Lady Gaga created the persona of Mayhem, or the Lady in Red, as she is referred to in Abracadabra. Despite this lack of novelty in presentation, in the vehicle this album's theme is explored through, Blurryface has never been a stale, dated concept in my eyes. It retains its effectiveness to this day. Firstly, there is a matter of visual presentation. The red colour contacts, beanie and blackened paint on the neck and hands tie in aesthetically well together, especially when mixed with the typical black, white and red clothing used in the music videos for this era. It's simplistic, but a remarkably cohesive design that also neatly fits in with the overall design of the era. And it's an effective visual indicator to when this character is present, especially when it often contrasts quite heavily with the environment. Even when it technically doesn't, like in some sections of the fairly local music video, the red colour contacts are still somehow so incredibly vibrant that it's hard to miss Blurry. There's also the matter of how Blurryface is played that really adds to his visual presentation. Tyler's overall body language in a lot of the music videos this era is quite jittery, full of expressive energy and grand gestures, always fluctuating in pace, always incredibly lively. There is a passion, a sense of life to his movements that automatically evaporates when Blurryface is present. His movements are far more composed and restrained, but there's something sharp and angular about the way he moves, harsh in the way he walks. There's something inherently intimidating and powerful about the way he moves, the way he stares directly at the audience with such a sharp and harsh glare. It's as if he's staring right through us, which really effectively adds to this presentation of a character who embodies insecurity. Insecurity isn't soft and gentle, and it's able to read a person like an open book and break them down to raw fear. This is honestly something I actually miss in the later albums and depictions of Blurryface. He doesn't really have that same menacing presence, that same power that keeps the audience's attention on him, that same effect of dread that really reinforces the portrayal of insecurity. In the words of modern lingo, I forever mourn the hype moments and aura that was the presentation of Blurryface in this era. Then there is the sonical presentation of Blurryface, which is something a bit more novel in the use of personas. Establishing Blurryface's presence using a leitmotif is such an excellent creative decision, because not only does the deep voice that heavily contrasts Tyler's generally tenor range of vocals really add to this terrifying, powerful presence, but it also makes the listener feel that Blurryface is there even when he technically isn't. And this is still a technique used in songs within the later records, like Backslide. It again adds to this presentation of insecurity being always present, bubbling under the surface, which is really effective for the embodiment of the character as a whole. Moreover, the metaphorical reasons for the design choices of Blurryface really help to tie the whole concept together into something that is just cohesive, effortless, but also easy to understand for newer fans. This isn't something you had to be there for to understand. As Tyler stated in the MTV interview, Blurryface is meant to represent this suffocating insecurity that we all have, this hatred of particular traits within ourselves, and for Tyler, this insecurity is over the things he creates, thus the existence of the black paint that is meant to have a greasy look. The black paint automatically creates connotations of being tainted, and the fact that it is meant to look greasy implies that it's hard to get rid of, something that will stick with you even after you wash the visual indicator off, much like insecurity. And, of course, the use of red colour contacts and the red beanie could potentially be a metaphor for Blurryface being something that is harmful in this current state, as red symbolises aggression, severity, and danger. It really adds to the intimidation of Blurryface as a character, as well as how a manifestation of suffocating insecurities is harmful to Tyler. 21 Pilots, your creation is perfection and you deserve all the flowers! The existence of Blurryface himself then neatly ties into the concept of the album itself. The album is not only about personal struggles and insecurities. Songs such as The Judge usher in some of the familiar struggles with faith seen in the band's earlier works. Goner and Ride really hone in on struggles with mental health and existentialism, while Stressed Out and Doubt are the quintessential insecurity songs, featuring abandonment issues and fears of worth. But it can also be considered to, interestingly, explore the concept of authenticity. I won't go too much into this, as this is something I want to save for after I've analysed Blurryface in its entirety and given the proper care and attention to the lyrics and concepts of the album, but songs such as Stressed Out, Goner, Lane Boy and Message Man all explore ideas of authenticity in different ways and in different facets. I think it's a stroke of genius to explore the concept of authenticity in an album where you also personify your struggles and visually make them wear your face, trying to find the line between yourself and these internal struggles that threaten to consume you and constitute your identity. And all of this aside, there's also the fact that this album is the introduction, the opening act to the larger story that is the Dema lore, the Clancy story, of which Blurryface is also a key figure. The conceptual presentation of the character alongside the actual themes and messages explored lyrically within the album itself all serve to perfectly and succinctly introduce some of what we see within Trench. All I remember when we first saw the Bishops was basically the equivalent of people pointing at Nico, recognizing the visual accents of his color scheme, and instantly deducing that he was our presentation for Blurryface in this era, utilizing what was already established lyrically in the record to decipher why he was the antagonist and how Dema functioned, when we merely had the crumbs of Dema.org and the jumpsuit music video. In general, the concept of the album as a whole, what it aims to explore and how, has always felt so effortless to me. Everything connects neatly on a conceptual level, and it also provides a solid foundation for what is explored later in the band's discography. As groundwork goes, it's concrete.
So the new record, it's called Blurryface, and not that this is a concept record, but there is a common thread running throughout.
In an article posted on his website, Brandon Reich detailed his process and justification for the plethora of design choices seen on the album cover. Design choices that are replicated throughout the era's aesthetic and merch. The whole design of this era is, as aforementioned, centered around the character of Blurryface. Reich interpreted him as a figure that was needed to help identify the internal struggle against self-hatred or insecurities, and subsequently the battle we are actually facing. As a result, the colours that are indicative of the figure had to be incorporated across the album. This led to the colour scheme being red, white, and black. Reich stated that the red specifically was introduced to provide more layers to the character. He isn't just black and white, and so the colour of violence, passion, and anger was introduced. I love the choice of these colours specifically to represent Blurryface. The black not only brings to mind that idea of something being tainted again, but also ideas of being lost, stuck in the dark with only small pinpricks of white light to guide you, which I feel really adds to the interpretation of Blurryface being this suffocating embodiment of insecurity, vague and elusive, but not entirely invincible. The combination of these colours gives the album a moody, dark vibe that really enhances the influence of Blurryface as a character on the record. But it also adds itself to the band's insistence to explore heavy topics, explore internal battles, not shy away from them, and do so in a passionate manner. Blurryface is in effect front and centre in this album, exposed to the viewer, which lends itself to the notion of understanding your struggles in order to understand the battle. Another frequent design aspect that underpins this era is the usage of different patterns to represent each of the different songs on the record. Reich called this a tapestry of patterns. These differing patterns specifically are meant to symbolise the differing traits we have as people that can be manipulated and warped by Blurryface. And I think this design decision is emblematic of a much larger merit of this era's design: the incorporation of the fans. Utilising the tapestry, as aforementioned, to represent different traits automatically allows for a sense of visibility by the fans. They can connect to this design on an emotional level by using it to represent aspects of themselves, seeing parts of themselves in the differing designs, and are therefore able to connect with the larger concept and themes of the era. Not only that, but Reich stated one of his main intentions for designing this era was rewarding fans and connecting them further to the band. And this is done through the usage of the no set symbol and the simplistic logo. These can be typed out on keyboards, allowing the fans to have a symbol to spread online and easily identify each other by. These design aspects, to me, not only successfully capture the concept of the album further, but it's indicative of everything the band has not only intended for this record, but for themselves throughout their career. They expose the problem and make their battle known publicly, and not only do they acknowledge the struggles of their fans, allowing them a sense of visibility through exposing the common enemy that can apply to anyone, they also acknowledge that this community constitutes part of the band's identity and approach to their music and internal battles. Also, I will die on this hill, Blurryface had far better designed merch than what we've seen in literally every other era afterwards, and I do think that lends itself to the effectiveness of Reich's overall designs for the era, that nearly every design feels neat and something I would want to wear. I will also forever stand by the statement that this era has the best music videos. Crisp quality aside and seamless introduction of the era's palette into literally every set they filmed in, the usage of lighting, especially in music videos such as Fairly Local, Lane Boy, and Heavy Dirty Soul, not only create a very moody vibe, but look so visually pleasing when introducing a signature pop of red, or in Lane Boy's case, literally any form of colour and energy. This isn't to say the later music videos are bad. Technologically, a lot of these music videos are a wonder, especially Paladin Straight. But the simplicity of the Blurryface music videos, the freedom to explore with lighting and design not to fit a lore narrative, but rather to fit the design aesthetic of the album, as well as the concept said aesthetic embodies, as well as the harsh contrast between light and shadow that is often played around with a lot in these music videos, it just creates an atmosphere that it's unmatched when looking back on them. To this day, Heavy Dirty Soul and Fairly Local are my two favourite music videos out of all of the Pilots' work, purely because they fit the mood of the album so well, tie themselves incredibly neatly with the dark concept that is Blurryface, and they're just so visually appealing. Again, much like the themes of this album and the concept they are explored through, the aesthetic elements of this era are cohesive. The album design, palette, music videos link together through committing to these underlying patterns and principles in the design. Not only this, but these design elements also connect incredibly well with what the album aims to explore conceptually. Everything is just pulled off so smoothly. And the simplicity of these design elements is so deceiving when considering the complexity of what these symbols and features actually represent. The complexity never takes a back seat. The ball is never dropped in favor of just making everything look clean and neat.
Song of the summer. I think for me it would probably be a song called Stressed Out by 21 Pilots. I think personally it's the one that I jammed the most.
Oh my god, does this album sound fantastic? A lot of the criticisms levied at the record tend to focus on the inconsistency in genre or sound across many of the tracks, especially considering albums like Vessel had this consistent technological electro-esque sound, whilst later albums such as Trench or Psy maintained a consistent usage of certain genres or instruments to tie the record together. For example, Trench consistently uses a lot of heavy bass, whereas Psy has always reminded me of the old pop genre, specifically floating around in the 90s. Like, Formidable quite literally sounds like the Friends theme tune to me. I've personally never understood why the lack of consistency is a criticism. The tracks are mastered beautifully. Firstly, there's not a single track on the album that feels weak sonically. Secondly, I would argue that Blurryface does offer a lot of consistency in regards to atmosphere. The songs either sound dark and moody, such as Fairly Local, Goner, Heavy Dirty Soul, etc., or they are lyrically dark and moody, such as Not Today, The Judge, and Polarize. And this ultimately reflects a wider consistency with the actual themes and design of the album itself, adding to that flawless presentation. Thirdly, I would argue that the difference in sound between each song is actually a major strength of this album. Each song is like an audible surprise, from Message Man utilizing a church organ to what quite literally sounds like a dog barking in Polarize. The way this album experiments with sound and style is not only a marvel, but a treat to your ears. Not only this, but the differences in sound and genre within the tracklist always makes for a fantastic re-listen after not listening to the album for some time. It doesn't feel dated or locked specifically behind a certain time or place to really get the full enjoyment and experience out of them, because the songs always sound new and fresh each time one goes to re-listen. Nor does it make listening to the album in one sitting feel like a boring or repetitive experience. That, and like I mentioned earlier regarding the design of the album, I think the inconsistency in sound also successfully communicates who the Pilots are. They aren't a group tied down by one specific genre, let alone one overarching style for a singular record. And I think that further goes to show the effectiveness in how this album has been put together as a whole, that everything really neatly links together. Aside from this, I also think the tracks on this record, for lack of a better phrase, understand the assignment. They understand what tone and atmosphere each individual song itself needs to effectively portray its lyrics and message. I mean, just listen to Goner. The sudden switch in tempo and steady build-up of instrumentation in the second verse, just for it all to crescendo at the scream of "Don't Let Me Be Gone," accompanied by such energetic and heavy instrumentation, all really help to illustrate the notion of someone trying desperately to fight for their life and have their struggle be known. Even Stressed Out, which I think gets unfairly bashed to high heaven and back, manages to portray the contrasting feelings of fear and nostalgia when considering the future and past perfectly, with the almost timid, stripped-back, airy instrumentation in the verses and the mellow-sounding synths in the pre-chorus. The songs, thanks to the perfect combination of sound and lyrics, are so perfectly emotional, so much so that they feel like their own living, breathing things. There is a life to these songs that it makes it really hard not to think about them very fondly or be drawn into the emotions and messages they convey. I can't really go into more detail about why the songs on this album shine in my eyes and heart 10 years later, because it's also down to personal preference, and I don't think saying I wish I could eat these songs physically would suffice as a professional enough statement. All that needs to be known is that this album has some of my favourite work sonically from the Pilots, and I don't think this tracklist has ever dropped in mastering quality, mastery over experimenting with sound, playability, its ability to continue reflecting the aims of the album's design and concept, and its ability to understand the content of its lyrics and reflect exactly what it needs in the sound to make them more successful. Nor do I think the raw emotion filtered into this album ever loses its impact. One way or another, these songs and sounds leave their mark on not only your mind, but also your soul. It's just pure art, and it's a form of art I never ever get tired of.
It was crazy though, because people were kind of like talking about it even before the album came out, like this idea of it kind of being number one.
I can't really reflect on Blurryface's greatness without acknowledging its success as a piece of media. It is their most commercially successful project, with currently 8 billion streams on Spotify, being the first album in history to have every song reach gold, platinum or multi-platinum on the RIAAs, and their only album to technically attract a Grammy for one of its songs. Although, we all know that the Grammys are ultimately a meaningless metric for measuring the worth of a piece of media, and anyone that seriously cares about awards and claims it automatically makes an artist superior needs to get some bids successful. We all know it, whether you're a die-hard fan or a local. And whilst I do stand by my tasteful joke earlier, I also think that Blurryface's merits are important to acknowledge regarding understanding why this album is so great, because ultimately, this success had to have come from somewhere. They aren't an artist notorious for dominating the mainstream, especially after Vessel, which means this album's success isn't by virtue of who is actually putting it out, but rather the quality and appeal of the work itself. And ultimately, I do think this mainstream success contributes towards what also makes a piece of art successful for artists. The ability for their art to actually reach, impact, and be enjoyed by others, whether they be a large crowd or a small group. 21 Pilots' core motivation is to spread that message of stay alive, live on through these songs. And that motivation fails if this message falls on deaf ears, if these songs never reach anyone. That's not to say the Pilots had no one before Blurryface. They had a solid fan base during the Vessel era, but their message and hopes, their comfort and solace was not as wide-reaching. The success of Blurryface has, in a way, contributed to the success of the Pilots' own pursuits and intentions. The messages that live in these songs of staying alive and staying strong reached many more people than what there initially were. It has provided many more people with something that helps them feel comforted, helps them feel seen, helps them feel a little less alone in a world that, at times, feels it is growing more apathetic and isolationary. It has helped people hold on, stay alive, find passion and purpose, given them something to continue for. And I think knowing that this album's success has helped to facilitate that, it's what makes this album not only great, but also so important. In line with discussions regarding Blurryface's success, I also think it's important to acknowledge the impact of this album, as the two often come hand in hand. It's kind of odd how this album's impact has never really been documented, or at least acknowledged in depth even within the community itself. As aforementioned, this era single-handedly increased the size of the fanbase. It had a quite big impact on the clique, and this isn't the only way the clique was impacted. There was a sort of cultural impact of Blurryface on the clique. For example, at the time, there was almost a language that circulated around the group, with things such as Fren, Sick as Frick, the Skeleton Clique, etc. Clique art started to become more of a widespread thing, to the point that this was what the fanbase and the Pilots in tandem were notorious for, alongside the seeds of the theorizing section of the fanbase that were planted due to the shenanigans of the Blurryface Twitter account. I think this again ties in perfectly with the purpose of some of the design aspects of this era being to incorporate the fans. The fans felt part of a community, but also part of the band. Again, that isn't to say this isn't the case nowadays, but I do think Blurryface, culturally, must have had some form of impact that results in such positive memories being associated with the era, that results in such a huge cheer of support when things like the Mute Math collabs are mentioned, or when the Doubt demo was released. And if you still doubt Blurryface's cultural impact, all I've got to say is this image has single-handedly done more for the fanbase than anything Trench ever could. And also, the album has had quite a large impact on me personally. For those who don't know, this was the album that introduced me to the Pilots. I joined this fanbase on the 21st of February 2016, which is honestly quite a fitting date, now I have the hindsight for it, and it has irrevocably changed my life. I didn't have a lot of things I was passionate about growing up, I didn't have a lot of interests, and certainly nothing that really helped me to connect with other people. So I often just pretended to have an interest in the things they were interested in to facilitate a connection, or to try and force myself to really like something and feel that sense of interest and passion about something. And then this album came along, and it felt like I finally had something that I was passionate about, that I really liked in the same way a person might like a pop star or a celebrity or a book or a TV series. It encouraged me to get interested in music, and the whole process of trying to decipher lyrics is what ultimately put me on the path of being interested in analysing language and literature. I fundamentally would not be the person I am today without Blurryface. I wouldn't like the music I like, I wouldn't have such a passion for trying to seek meaning in a piece of work, I wouldn't have such a passion for analysing language, nor would this channel exist. It also got me through a lot of things I was struggling with at the time of discovering the record. It gave me a distraction, and opened me up to the other media and content they had produced that aptly described how I felt or what I was going through. There's such a power to literally be able to nearly eradicate every bad memory of that time, and leave me with some Blurryface tinted glasses. No other album has come close to having this sort of impact on me, although Self-Titled and Clancy have come a little bit close. Those two are my second favourite albums. And I think, regardless of whether some of these sections can be contested by differing opinion, the personal impact Blurryface had on me is something that can never be refuted. And that is something that automatically makes the album one of the greats in my eyes 10 years down the line. This album, and listening to its tracklist, or even seeing the Blurryface fan cams currently conquering Twitter-Click's timeline like a plague of locusts, always brings up fond memories for me. Which is odd, because this was the period where I was least involved in the communal side of the clique. But there's just something about it that I can't accurately put to words. The vibes of that era were immaculate, and it's become something so fond and so dear to me. I actually feel the presence of Blurryface, the album, not the character, because Jesus Christ, that would be terrifying, in brief moments, like driving down the motorway in the sunset, walking within a forest late at night, seeing the lights of the city up in London as I'm on the train, or watching thunderclouds in the evening at home. It sounds quite unremarkable, sure, that these glimpses come to me in these moments, but I think that is a testament to the work of art that is this record. It's unapologetically and powerfully emotional, so much so that it has this profound ability to intertwine itself with our memory and moments in our life, even when we least expect it. And it is also unabashedly open about everything the Pilots hold dear to them. Their identity, their artistic integrity, their intentions and message, and most of all, their fans. So thank you 21 Pilots for producing such a masterpiece of an album. And thank you Blurryface for changing my life for the better. I hope you have a wonderful 10th birthday.